As a psychologist, I'm very interested in how people interpret success in their career. So when I get to this point in my career, why did I get here? Well, one of the mistakes in our mindset to some degree, even as a nation, is we became very fond of mechanics and technology and engineering and rational solutions. But we are all also driven by fears and anxieties and hopes and aspirations. And I feel very strongly that treating people, as whole individuals, is how you get their best work.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick here, Kirkpatrick Podcast. Kym Buchanan, glad that you're here. And before we start talking and discussing and who knows what we'll do, I'm going to read about you. You probably know all this, but not everybody does. It says Kym is a career educator. He's been a high school teacher, professor, associate dean. He's now a leader in planning and evaluation at the Foreign Service Institute, the U.S. Department of State. Kym earned a PhD in learning, technology, and culture. Wow, that sounds pretty impressive. Mine was just clinical psychology, just pretty simple. His work spans psychology, sustainability, experiential learning, is energetic, funny, and inspirational. That's you, because I've talked to you enough times to know that's all true.
Well, thank you.
Good. You want to share a little bit more about your career, things that people might find interesting?
Yes. So I was fortunate to earn a PhD from a program that existed for a short period of time at Michigan State that combined psychology and technology. So we were really looking at the intersection of how people use technology and how technology affects us. So I wrote my dissertation on video games. A lot of the work I did as a professor was training teachers, which really gave me a good experience. You know, you learn by teaching things. And so I thought a lot about issues of motivation and creating classroom climate and what people actually need to learn. And I again had the privilege, in quotes, the opportunity to lead at a university through some major changes and challenges. And that also got me thinking about how organizations deal with changes and challenges and the role of training and evaluation in preparing people for that.
Well, let me ask you, and I'm not really one to follow a perfect script, but when you're talking about those changing times, and you did the quote thing, I saw you did the quote, what do you see happening now as far as changing times, rapidly changing times in our world?
Yeah, so I'm old enough to have seen the internet happen, smartphones. There's an app for that. The changes to other industries, newspapers, taxi cabs, hotels, those are all different now than they used to be. Travel agents, and I see it coming for us. I see it coming for education, training, talent development, and we kind of knew it was coming. We watched TED Talks happen, and we no longer were the sole place to get learning. And I think it's on us to lead and model how professional educators change when the needs of our participants change and the work that they're doing changes.
What about the needs of their senior leaders? What advice would you have of how we need to change what we're doing in order to better, and I'm going to just know it's true, better connect with senior leaders so that they're not thinking we're just a cost center?
Yeah, well, as a psychologist, I'm very interested in how people interpret success in their career. So when I get to this point in my career, why did I get here? Well, it's probably because I made certain choices, I exhibited certain behaviors, and those behaviors worked to get me to here, but they might not be the behaviors that other people need to succeed now. And so I think it's talking in a sensitive way to supervisors to help them understand that as things are changing, we might need to train people differently. So I'll give you an example. I work at the Foreign Service Institute for the Department of State, and I'm often doing evaluation projects where we need input from our senior leadership who have been here 15, 20 years. The training we delivered to them in 2004 is very different than the training we're delivering to our current officers. And so it pushes us to simultaneously respect their expertise, their experience, their perspective, and also to say we're talking to other stakeholders to really understand what's relevant and current now.
Here's something I'm going to run past you. I talked with a group of CLO people, happen to be in the U.S. And one person said and asked me a question: how do we get those senior leaders to show more enthusiasm and buy into what we're doing? Why
Yeah.
don't they? Why don't they get excited about training?
Yeah.
And you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you how I responded.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing your response. A couple things come to mind. One is I notice leaders pretty much at any level are often overwhelmed with the crisis of the week or the crisis of the month. And so
Okay.
training is an opportunity to have a conversation of, looking behind the horizon, looking upstream. And at the same time, I hear from leaders they often wish they could do more on talent development, on retention. They're so busy putting out fires sometimes that they can't engage meaningfully with the talent pathway, how we recruit, retain, train, promote. Um, and so I like giving them something they can do to help with that, whether that's, we have an onboarding program in my school, and we invite the dean of the school to come in and talk with the participants. And that's a highlight of her week because she's busy making sure all the hiring happens and all the money's in place. The reality of what we're achieving is bringing in all these smart, passionate people to help make our organization better. So I look for opportunities, small things they can do.
Well, I heard you say it. I could have the court reporter read it back, but you said that person comes in to talk with the participants, not talk to the
Yep.
participants. I think you maybe did that deliberately.
Yeah. Yeah, in the department, we provide talking points to a principal when they come in, but we really encourage them to make it dialogic. And thankfully, we work with leadership that is very interested in what people's questions are and what their wonderings are, and trying to be candid. And I think that sets a tone to be accessible, and to, the open door policy idea, and to humanize our leadership so we know who they are, because leadership can be very lonely.
What kind of things occur from your vantage point as a result of those kind of cross-functional conversations?
I think it helps leadership stay in touch with the reality on the ground. They come to, for instance, some of our professional development events and generally participate just as participants. I was in one just before I came here, and it it ensures, one, that people understand who they are, which I think is even more important in an era of telework and hybrid work, where you're not having the accidental conversations in the hallway or the elevator because, we log into Zoom and we log out to Zoom. There was no conversation before we started this experience. And it lets them, I think, feel the climate, the atmosphere, the mood, the morale, whatever you want to say. Because as a leader, I remember at a university feeling more and more detached, not just from what my staff, where they were at in their mood, their mindset, their morale, but also the students, our participants. I was so far removed from the classroom at times, I needed to stay in touch with what my participants' needs were and the moves I could make as a leader to be responsive to that.
Well, now here's something I find interesting. That obviously, a lot of this, your mapping, the mapping we do, and all this is very tactical and strategic as well. But I heard you use the word feeling
Yeah.
and staying in touch. What's that have to do with work in the government?
Yeah, well, I love that you asked that question, because as a psychologist, I'm very passionate about passion. I think that one of the mistakes in our mindset to some degree, even as a nation, is we became very fond of mechanics and technology and engineering and rational solutions, but we are all also driven by fears and anxieties and hopes and aspirations and traumas and so on. And I feel very strongly, and the research backs me up, that treating people, as whole individuals, is how you get their best work. So even if you don't want to do it for ethical reasons, and I think we should for ethical reasons, just for pragmatic reasons, recognizing how morale affects productivity. This gets us into there's this idea of a presenteeism, right? Where like I'm
Yeah.
in my seat working at my computer, but I'm not really doing my best work today. And so morale is part of that, how we ensure that people are positioned to do their best work.
And I'm pretty passionate too, and very passionate about relationships, and our model begins with relationships because, and this is right in alignment with what you're saying. I think it's true, and research backs it up, that a lot of people make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. We could come up with all kinds of examples where one thing that piqued their heart, their spirit, they're going to go that way, even if
Yeah.
logic might say not to. But I think the key is if we can connect with people, first of all, from an emotional point of view, not we're boo-hooing over each other, but from a caring point of view, from a
Yeah.
listening, asking the second and third question to show I noticed what you said,
Yeah.
I heard what you said, and it's meaningful. Then the work, I'm getting all fired up here. You get me all going. Then the work itself has a much better chance of being successful when there's that, because I think those kind of things, talking with people, builds trust.
Yep.
More so, in addition to logic and making a good model and a good case for things.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think when done well, training can be an act of caring. It's investing in somebody. It's saying, not only did we hire you, but also we're going to help you grow. And if the interview is the first date, then training is the marriage. Training is like, okay, you agreed to work here, and now we're actually helping you grow and succeed.
Well, and right along the lines there, people talk a lot, and you've mentioned it about attrition.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
why are we losing our people? And then they think, well, we're losing them early on. We've got to upgrade our orientation, our onboarding program, our HR initiatives and stuff, and bring them in. But I think that a lot of the research says it happens later on,
Mm-hmm.
because they may go back to who knows what kind of supervision, what kind of work culture, atmosphere that is not that way, and they get disillusioned. They think nobody cares about them. Think nobody's interested in their future. They're not making a contribution. And I think that's a bigger cause, rather than let's fix it with a problem up front. I think the solution is if they're engaged early on, don't lose it. Make sure
Yeah.
that it is strengthened, so they don't become statistics of leaving, but they become recruiters for the organization. I'm seeing that all
Absolutely.
over the military. That
Mm-hmm.
they instead of leaving, they say, I'm going to talk to my buddies about this. I feel like somebody cares, and I'm making a difference.
Absolutely. And at the Department of State, we're a mission-driven organization. People choose to work for us because they think this is a place where they can do their best work with passion about issues that they care about. So we try to honor that.
And that's where I back to the original question, when the person said, why can't we make the senior leaders passionate about our training? I said, that's not going to happen. We've been trying that for decades. What needs to happen is you need to be passionate about their stuff, rather than, oh, come on over and join us. No, we need to join them with the knowledge and the intelligence and the passion, that we are passionate about their workplace, their workforce, and whatever their department division goals are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the solution. It isn't come over to our side of the house, which they see as a cost center, that we need to be seen as not being a cost center, but of adding value. So it's just a whole flip-flop of what I think we're trying to do too often.
Well, and one of the many reasons that I like the Kirkpatrick model is you emphasize telling a story. You emphasize that it should be an oral report. And so I teach my team and I teach my participants who take my course on evaluation. You're trying to tell a story in which the supervisor, the leader, sees themselves in the story and can see the connections between how the training is going to meet the needs of the participant, as well as meet the needs of their unit, and incidentally make you look good as a leader.
Oh, yes. And incidentally, that's right. One of the things that I do, that I've talked to some people that are really good at what they do, but they haven't thought of this, is when we call it the kind of the closing argument to the jury.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
time all this work's done and they're gathered to find out, how did it go? Did it work? All that stuff. And, we've got some charts and graphs, not a lot of narrative, not of complication, but maybe 20 minutes worth, 15 minutes for senior leaders, and show them the logic of the progression of the learning and the performing. And then at the end, I do it the same way every time. And it works every time when I say, and that, oh, wait a minute, Kym, the rest of you, I almost forgot. There's some people I want you to meet. And the back door opens, and in comes the story. In comes the people that put the faces to the cold data. that doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
a heart, but they come in and they tell the story and they say, we couldn't have done it without your help. And now we are inspired to do more. We have more people are coming to us asking for help. And but the part that really upsets me is then they get a standing ovation from the jury, from there, and I don't. And of course, I act like my feelings are hurt. Oh, why don't you guys applaud? But obviously, I'm just messing around with them because they're the ones that deserve it. But it just is almost magic when they can see, oh, those are our people, and we're hearing their story. And usually, it's a story that is a it's a what's the word I think a story that shows what we were before, what we did, and what results we got, and then what we're doing differently now, and
Transformation.
the kind of results we're seeing. So it's a historical comparison,
Yeah.
with the story, and it's a real simple thing to do, but it works. It's just a little tip here at no extra charge to who's listening. Well, what's your deal about using evaluation to navigate the extraordinary?
Yeah, well, that was the that was the theme of my presentation at the Kirkpatrick Summit, and thanks for putting that on and inviting me. Sometimes I write about stuff I already understand, and sometimes I write about stuff I'm trying to understand, and I use this opportunity to try to understand my value add to my organization currently and in the past, and how I'm just obsessed with systems thinking. So looking beyond the horizon, looking upstream, and how I'm more comfortable with uncertainty and complexity than many of my colleagues and my leaders. So I talked about the idea of productive discomfort, that if you're in charge and you're out in front and you're supposed to show the way, but you don't have a map, that's a bad feeling, right? I guess we now say your smartphone doesn't have signal and Google Maps isn't working for you, right? Like you still have to lead. And so how we navigate that uncertainty, and to some degree, and I didn't get into this in my summit presentation, how we model that, how we show up for work, even when there are these extraordinary changes and our mentors can't tell us how to do it because they were in charge in a different era, when, the industry can't tell us how to do it because the industry is going through its own, convulsions. I think it's powerful to think about that. So as a concrete example, I talked about our course on diplomacy at high threat posts. And these are US, embassies and consulates in areas with perhaps civil unrest or terrorism. And we know a lot about what's happened in the past, various events, big and small security incidences or threats to US personnel. The next instance, the next event won't be exactly the same, right? Like we can study what happened in the past, we can work on our systems, we can work on our training, but we also need to prepare our participants and our leaders for the unexpected. It's going to take a new form because technology changes, the threats to personnel change, and so on. And man, you can be really good at leading people in those past situations and then find yourself in a position of leadership. And now we need to train people for situations we can't fully predict or can't fully prepare for. And how do you train for that? How do you evaluate that? I think it's an important question.
Well, I think you train for it, and this is working a lot with the military, is they don't know what the bad guys are going to do. They have a good idea. They have a good idea of what their systems are and what their weapons are and what their thinking is to some degree. But a lot of it, you've got to train. They say we got to train the leaders to be able to read the changing battlefield.
Yeah.
In order to make call audibles and on the just in time kind of decisions, rather than here is how you can handle every possible contingency, because nobody can possibly take that all in and be able to use it when they need it.
Yeah, I agree. The easy hit is the idea that the Department of Defense is always preparing to fight the last war, right? We're really good at after action and trying to understand what we did wrong. It's how we, like you said earlier, it's how we bring that through into forward action, how we take the lessons learned, but maybe don't become too attached to the particulars, because the particulars are going to change.
That's good. Well, I have a feeling there's more rolling around inside your mind there. Why don't you give the lookers or the listeners here any other advice that you might think as far as how to position themselves for their own career and to make a difference in whatever role they're in?
I think I think lean into the predictive discomfort, and to the degree that you feel comfortable letting people know that you don't necessarily have all the answers, but you're confident if we ask the right questions, if we create the space for the conversations, we don't have to have the answers. So as an evaluator, for instance, when we're looking at the data from training, I am sometimes working on projects where I don't fully understand the training that's being delivered because I haven't done the job and I don't necessarily understand the language, but I can coach people through a process of thinking about it and analyzing it. And especially for some of my clients, how they're going to talk to their leadership about it. And I think creating the space and helping people tell stories is a big deal. So I'll give you an example. In the course that I teach on evaluation, which features the Kirkpatrick model, as a pre-course survey, before they even come to class, I ask them, are you persuaded by stories or are you persuaded by numbers? Would you rather have a story or would you rather have a chart? And every single time, the majority of my participants prefer the stories. And so then I say, all right, so when you're talking to leadership, yes, you should have a table. Yes, you should have a chart. And what kind of story are you going to tell? So, I mean, in the department, we like bottom line up front. My best advice to evaluators in an era of so much change that we don't even understand yet and can't foresee, get good at storytelling. Stories are how we make sense of what happened. Stories are how we can start imagining what we're going to do moving forward.
One last thing, and then I'm going to ask how people can find you, is I almost hear so many people when they're taking some of our programs, they're saying the senior leaders want data. They want data, data, data. Sometimes they don't even know better, or sometimes they're assuming it and they want data. But I'll tell you, I say, well, that's important, but it doesn't have the heart. It doesn't give the whole true picture. And a lot of times you can't even come up with data because, they're expecting it to be so Spearman and Pearson valid, 98%, all that stuff. And a lot of times it's survey numbers. Oh, that's data what they want. No, I don't think so. They want to know the stories because, again, you're trying to influence the leaders, the senior leaders, not just provide information to them. And the influencing comes obviously best with a balance. But a lot of the influencing has to come from the stories. And you and I are two peas in a pod when it comes to that. How can they find you, Kym?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll just say LinkedIn. You have to spell my name correctly, Kym Buchanan, Buchanan. And I love talking about this stuff, and I don't think there's nearly enough conversations happening right now about how we keep pivoting as organizations. I think a lot of people want to get back to some kind of, say, pre-COVID-19 normal, and there's so many things changing right now. We're having to invent a new normal. At least in our organization, it's an ongoing conversation. Just for instance, how much we deliver virtual versus how much we deliver in person. That's a conversation evaluators can help facilitate.
A lot of the times the Kirkpatrick model is about the end in mind, and Stephen Covey, all that, the end in mind. But I love conversations and getting into new things in life where I don't know the end in mind.
Yes, exactly.
I don't want to have to say, this is a GPS address. I want this to go. That takes away all the magic and all the options of where you can go, whether it's personal or professional.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, you said it well, and I really enjoyed this, Kym. It was a good talk, and I trust our paths will cross again.
Absolutely. Well, you're a valued partner in what we're doing at the Department of State.
Glad to be there. Okay. Good talking to you.